Hello everyone, and welcome to the Puzzle Proof, your go-to corner of the internet for unraveling mysteries, brain teasers, and everything that keeps your little grey cells buzzing. I'm thrilled you've joined us today. Before we dive in, drop a comment below and let me know, where in the world are you tuning in from? Can't wait to see our community map grow. Chapter 1, An Invitation to Brookshire Manor. It was on a mild July morning that Hercule Poirot stirred from slumber to discover, upon his antique mahogany dressing table, an envelope bearing the elegant seal of Brookshire Manor. The cream-colored stationery was embossed with the stylized initials, BH, in gold, and the invitation within promised a refined weekend of artistic appreciation and discerning company, to be hosted by Lady Beatrice Harrington. Poirot, whose passion for both art and genteel society was matched only by his devotion to the exercise of his little grey cells, could scarcely resist such an overture. After a leisurely breakfast of soft-boiled eggs and toast, accompanied by a cup of Darjeeling served in his beloved Limoges china, Poirot arranged his impeccably tailored morning suit. He spent particular care over his grey silk cravat, adjusting it to fall in perfect symmetry beneath his starched collar. A final glance in the cheval mirror assured him that not a hair defied his coiffure. Thus prepared, he set forth in his modest yet comfortable automobile, bound for the Cotswolds, where Brookshire Manor stood amid undulating hills and emerald pastures. The journey was serene, the country lanes framed by hedgerows alive with the chatter of songbirds. Poirot's mind, ever alert, catalogued every detail, the dusty tracks that hinted at recent carriage traffic, the subtle curve in a stone boundary wall that bespoke an estate of considerable age. Upon cresting a gentle rise, he beheld the manor itself, a graceful edifice of honeyed limestone, gabled roofs and mullioned windows glinting in the morning sun. Ivy climbed the east facade in tidy swathes, and a formal garden lay at the front, its borders ablaze with roses and lavender. As Poirot's car came to a halt on the gravel drive, the tall gate swung inward on silent hinges. He alighted to find Lady Beatrice Harrington awaiting him beneath the portico. She was a woman of striking presence, tall, with cold grey eyes that nonetheless held a spark of cordiality. She wore a gown of dove-grey silk, cut simply but with exquisite taste, and a string of pearls rested at her throat. She offered Poirot her gloved hand, her fingers slender and cool. "Monsieur Poirot, it is an honor," she said in measured tones. "I trust your journey was comfortable." "Parfaitement, madam," he replied, inclining his head. "The countryside is at its most agreeable in summer. And, naturellement, the prospect of examining your private collection afforded me every pleasure." Lady Beatrice's lips curved in a faint smile. "Then I am relieved. Sir Edmund will join us presently. He is in the library preparing a brief on each piece." She bestowed upon him a quick, appraising glance. "I have no doubt your insights will prove invaluable." Poirot nodded, accepting the subtle compliment. "I shall endeavour not to disappoint." He followed Lady Beatrice through the grand entrance hall, where portraits of stern-faced ancestors glowered from their gilded frames. The marble floor was polished to a mirror sheen, and far above, an ornate chandelier dripped crystal prisms scattering prisms of light. A gentle hush pervaded the house, as though it were reluctant to disturb its own grandeur. The drawing-room, where guests were to assemble before luncheon, was awash in pastel hues. Slip-covered sofas and wing-back chairs were arranged in intimate clusters around low tables bearing porcelain vases of peonies. Sheer curtains filtered the sunlight to a gentle glow. A pair of grand pianoforti rested in one corner, their polished lids half-raised. Other guests were already present. Dr. Alastair Penrose, the family physician, stood by the hearth, his medical bag in hand. He was a middle-aged man of kindly aspect, though his eyes flickered with a hint of apprehension as he greeted Poirot. Beside him sat Miss Eleanor Harrington, Lady Beatrice's niece, slender, dark-haired, and demurely dressed in pastel muslin. She offered a soft, "How do you do?" that nevertheless carried an undercurrent of curiosity. Further along, Mr. Marcus Sterling, an art dealer of some renown, examined a small bronze statuette with perceptive eyes. His tailored jacket and neatly trimmed moustache bespoke business acumen and self-assurance. Lastly, Mrs. Olive Davies, the housekeeper, hovered discreetly by a sideboard laid with silver urns of coffee and plates of Petits fours. Her prim uniform and poised manner revealed decades of duty to the Harrington household. As Poirot cast his discerning gaze over each face, his moustache twitched with interest. Beneath the veneer of civility lay currents of unease, shadows of conversation unspoken, alliances unvoiced. He quietly catalogued minutiae, the crease at the corner of Dr. Penrose's mouth, as though concealing a doubt, the flutter of Miss Eleanor's fan, betraying nervousness, the slight smudge of dust upon Mr. Sterling's cuff, incongruous for one so meticulous, the steady, watchful posture of Mrs. Davies, as though guarding more than the silverware. Lady Beatrice cleared her throat. "I trust you are all comfortably settled? Monsieur Poirot shall join Sir Edmund in the library shortly to review the artworks. We hope to reconvene here for luncheon at 1:30. A murmur of assent rippled through the company. As Lady Beatrice glided from the room, Poirot moved toward the library door with measured steps. He felt the familiar thrill of anticipation. He knew that beneath the calm surface of Brookshire Manor lay mysteries waiting to be unearthed. Before crossing the threshold, he paused to inhale the subtle scent of aged mahogany and old parchment that drifted from within. It was a smell he found endlessly fascinating, the aroma of history embodied in wood and paper. Beyond the door, Sir Edmund Harrington stood before a tall bookcase, his back turned. He was a dignified man, though the line between his brows betrayed concentration, perhaps even tension. Poirot cleared his throat softly. Sir Edmund turned, and a courteous, if slightly strained, smile spread across his features. "Ah, Monsieur Poirot, welcome," he said. "Over here, if you will. I have assembled the Cézanne, the turn-of-century Impressionists, and a curious Flemish study that I believe deserves your expertise." He gestured toward a central table, where framed pieces lay under protective glass covers. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Très bien, Sir Edmund. Let us proceed, step by step, in logical order. For to understand the character of the art is, in truth, to understand the character of those who assembled it." And with that, the detective's first inquiry began, in an atmosphere of polite refinement, beneath the shadow of secrets yet to be revealed. Chapter 2: The Dinner and the Discovery. The great oak doors of Brookshire Manor's dining room swung open at precisely 7 o'clock. A hush fell upon the assembled company as they entered, a tableau of finery and expectation. The table, 6 feet in length, was laid with lilies of the valley interspersed among crystal decanters of claret. Silver cutlery gleamed under the glow of wrought iron candelabras, and the walls were lined with dark wood paneling carved into arabesques. Outside, a summer storm rumbled distantly, though within, the atmosphere was one of controlled elegance. Lady Beatrice took her place at the head of the table, her countenance composed, yet inviting. Sir Edmund sat to her right, displaying the slightest tremor of impatience in his fingers as he adjusted his cufflinks. Opposite him, Dr. Alastair Penrose poured a measured measure of wine, while Miss Eleanor Harrington waited demurely for her soup to be served. Marcus Sterling, the dealer, leaned forward in conversation, and Mrs. Olive Davies hovered discreetly behind Lady Beatrice's chair, ready to attend to any request. At the opposite end, Hercule Poirot observed with keen interest, his small grey cells already at work. Conversation began with polite queries about the journey to the manor, the weather, and the charming Cotswold landscape. Yet all talk soon gravitated towards the latest arrival in Sir Edmund's collection, a delicate Cézanne sketch, recently acquired at auction. Sir Edmund's eyes shone with pride as he described the provenance of the piece, its previous owner a mysterious Parisian heiress who had taken great pains to authenticate its origin. Dr. Penrose listened attentively, but Poirot noted the physician's gaze kept flicking toward Lady Beatrice, as though he wished to gauge her reaction. "The subtle brushwork here," Sir Edmund said, gesturing towards a line of exquisite floral engravings on a sideboard, "reveals the artist's true hand. One can discern the way Cézanne viewed nature, not realistically, but as an arrangement of shapes and colors." He paused, sipping his soup. "I am most anxious to hear Monsieur Poirot's thoughts upon close inspection." Poirot inclined his head, spoon poised. "It will be my pleasure, Sir Edmund." "Mademoiselle, perhaps you will pass the bread." Miss Eleanor offered a basket of warmed rolls, her gloved hand trembling ever so slightly. Poirot caught the faintest waft of lavender drift from her direction, an aroma he made a mental note of storing alongside his other observations. Meanwhile, Mr. Sterling interjected with questions about the sketch's market value, prompting Sir Edmund to brush aside financial concerns with a humour that may have seemed out of place had the tone not been so genteel. Just as the main course arrived, roast pheasant with a fine Madeira sauce, a distant crash of thunder shook the windows. A hush descended, broken only by the gentle clink of porcelain. Lady Beatrice excused herself to attend to an ornamental clock on the sideboard, muttering something about its mechanism having been disturbed. She bent low, adjusting a window, while Dr. Penrose continued the conversation with Mr. Sterling in a low voice. The dealer's expression was unreadable, his eyes, narrowed, suggested calculation. Poirot tucked his napkin with fastidious care and rose. "If you will forgive me for a moment, Miss Amos, I should like to fetch my lorgnette from the library." I left it upon a small table near the portrait of the First Lady Harrington. He offered a gentle smile and withdrew from the table, leaving the others to their meal. As he passed beneath the chandelier, the light glinted upon his polished shoes and the perfectly knotted cravat at his throat. Moments later, a sudden, agonized cry rent the air, a sound so unexpected that cutlery clattered and Lady Beatrice's back was seen moving swiftly from the clock. The household gasped, and Dr. Penrose sprang to his feet. "Good heavens, what was that?" he exclaimed. Half the company abandoned their dinner chairs, voices raised in alarm. Poirot, dagger straight, hurried down the corridor towards the study, the origin of the cry. He passed a storm-lit window and heard hushed words, there, oh dear. He entered the study with the same calm precision that he was famous for. The scene within was grim. Sir Edmund lay slumped across a high-backed leather chair, his head fallen to one side, the white collar of his shirt stained crimson. A silver letter opener protruded from his left shoulder at an unsettling angle, its hilt resting against the polished mahogany desk. For a moment, there was silence save for the drumming of the rain upon the leaded panes. Then Poirot moved forward, speaking in a low, composed voice, "Miss Amos, please step back." Mrs. Davies, pale and trembling, clung to Miss Eleanor's arm. Mr. Sterling pressed a hand to his lips, as though to stifle a gasp. Lady Beatrice, her composure momentarily shattered, moaned softly beside the doorway. Poirot knelt beside the desk, his fine moustache quivering with focus. He examined the letter opener. It bore no visible fingerprints, yet the blade was smeared with the victim's blood. He inspected the small sheet of paper on the desk, discovering its corner crudely torn and the ink running into a blot. The wall behind Sir Edmund bore a scuff mark, as though a struggle had occurred. Beyond, the lamp flickered, casting dancing shadows across the room. "Dr. Penrose," Poirot said without turning, "would you kindly examine Sir Edmund's pulse?" The physician bent, closing his eyes to focus. "No pulse," he confirmed softly. Poirot continued, "And Lady Beatrice, did you hear or see anything upon leaving the dining room?" The hostess's composure returned in steel-edged tones. "Only a clatter, then the cry. I hurried in and discovered," her voice faltered, and she clasped a handkerchief to her lips. Poirot stood, dusting his hands. "I require no further assistance at the moment. Inspector Blackwood will prudently see to your comfort, but until he arrives, I must ask that no one leaves these premises. We must preserve every detail for inspection." He turned his gaze upon each individual, his expression inscrutable. "One of you knows what occurred here, one of you holds the motive. But only the little grey cells shall reveal the truth." And so, as lightning crackled above and the thunder rolled, the gentle order of Brookshire Manor was shattered, replaced by a grim tableau awaiting Poirot's mastery of deduction. Chapter 3: The methodical investigation begins. Inspector Blackwood arrived just as Poirot concluded his initial perusal of the study. The inspector was a solid man in a well-cut overcoat, his brow furrowed but respectful of Poirot's reputation. Poirot rose and greeted him with a slight bow. "Mon ami, the scene requires both your authority and my little grey cells. Let us proceed." Together they re-entered the study. Poirot paused at the threshold to canvass the room one more time. The desk remained as he had left it, the silver letter opener embedded in the leather chair, the half-burnt letter with its serrated edge, and Sir Edmund's spectacles, untouched, perched precisely on the desk's corner. By contrast, a leather inkwell lay toppled on the floor, its dark fluid seeping into the patterned carpet. Poirot's eyes flicked to the scrawl of footprints leading toward a narrow side door, an exit rarely used at night. "Notice," Poirot murmured, "there are no signs of forced entry. The murderer was known, or at least unafraid of our victim. And yet," he pointed to the letter, "someone attempted to destroy a message. The tip of the paper is scorched, but what remains may be our first clue." He donned a pair of forensic gloves, ever courteous, and carefully lifted the letter for inspection. The remaining words hinted at betrayal. "I cannot allow this to continue. You will answer for your—" The final ink flourish trailed into oblivion. Beside the desk, Poirot noted a single leather boot print, the heel pressed into the carpet fibers. Its pattern was uncommon, 3 ridges forming a trifurcate motif. He traced it with his fingertip. "Mrs. Davies, did you clean this carpet recently?" he inquired. The housekeeper shook her head. "Only Lady Beatrice's boudoir, monsieur. This corridor I have never polished." Poirot's eyebrows lifted. "Curious, non? The murderer disturbed the carpet here, then retreated through that side door." Inspector Blackwood began cataloguing evidence, while Poirot moved to the fireplace. He knelt before the hearth and examined the ashes. He produced a small trowel and delicately sifted the embers, uncovering a charred fragment of parchment. "Another piece of the letter," he declared. "We shall reconstruct the message, inch by inch, until the motive stands clear." He pocketed the fragment in a labeled evidence bag. With the crime scene secured, Poirot directed the inspector to assemble the other occupants in the drawing room. There, Lady Beatrice sat on a fainting couch, supported by Miss Eleanor's gentle arm. Dr. Penrose paced the length of the room, while Mr. Sterling leaned against the mantelpiece, his arms folded, and Mrs. Davies hovered in the corner. Poison tension clung to the air like a heavy shawl. "One by one," Poirot said, drawing a small notepad from his inside pocket, "I shall ask you a few questions. I beg your cooperation in the interests of justice." He began with Mrs. Davies. "Madam, you discovered Sir Edmund's body." She swallowed. Yes, monsieur. I heard the cry and came at once. I thought perhaps a servant had slipped. Poirot cocked his head. And you heard no voices before the cry? The housekeeper hesitated. Only a raised tone, perhaps in anger, but I could not distinguish words. Next came Dr. Alistair Penrose. Poirot observed the doctor's hands as he steepled his fingers. Doctor, you were closest to the door when the cry rang out. What did you see or hear? The physician met Poirot's gaze with professional calm. Only Lady Beatrice by the clock, fumbling with its winder. Then the cry. I rushed here immediately. Poirot made a quick note. The clock had been disturbed, a deliberate red herring to delay pursuit of the true exit. Miss Eleanor Harris, or rather, Harrington, was the third. Her palms lay open in her lap, they were ungloved and free of any soiling. Poirot studied the fine lines of worry around her eyes. Mademoiselle, you were in the dining room when the murder occurred. Did anyone leave before the cry? She bit her lip. No one, monsieur, save Monsieur Poirot, who went for his lorgnette. I thought I heard breathing in the corridor, but it was too dark to see. Poirot tapped his pen. A breathing sound could imply a second person hiding, or perhaps a collapsed witness struggling for breath. Finally, Mr. Marcus Sterling took his turn. The dealer's jaw was set. I was examining silverware with Dr. Penrose until the dinner's end. When we heard the cry, I joined you, monsieur, as did the others. Poirot raised an eyebrow. Your cuff bore a faint dusting of ash. Did you handle the letter fragments in the fireplace earlier? Sterling's cheeks colored. Nonsense, Poirot. I have never touched that hearth. Poirot nodded slowly, making a note to fingerprint the cuff and the statuette Sterling had handled at dinner. With the interviews complete, Poirot requested a moment to himself. He returned to the study, where the inspector awaited. Miss Amis, Poirot said, we now have our preliminary facts, a private exit, a destroyed letter, a tampered clock, and scattered clues of ash, soot, and footprints. He paused, staring at the scorched blot on the desk. Tomorrow, I shall reassemble the servants and the guests for further questioning. Tonight, I shall allow my little grey cells to work uninterrupted. Back in his chambers, Poirot sat at his writing table beneath a steaming lamp. He arranged his notes, ember fragments, boot print pattern, ink-smudged letter, and the scent of lavender still faint in his mind. Each detail was a brushstroke upon the canvas of mystery. As thunder rolled overhead, Poirot smiled ever so slightly. The game was afoot, and already the outlines of truth were beginning to emerge from the shadows. Chapter 4, Secrets and Suspicions. The next morning dawned grey and mist-laden over Brookshire Manor, as though nature itself reflected the mood within. By 7 o'clock, Hercule Poirot was already in the breakfast room, seated at one end of a polished oak table, nursing a cup of Earl Grey and leafing through his carefully arranged notes. The steam from his tea curled in the lamplit air, mingling with the faint tang of citrus from the marmalade. Lady Beatrice Harrington entered, composed as ever, though the slightest tension tugged at her lips. She poured herself coffee and offered Poirot a curt nod. I trust you rest well, monsieur. Très bien, madame, replied Poirot smoothly. The mind works best when well nourished by sleep. He tucked into his poached eggs, eyes never still. Soon, the rest of the household assembled, Dr. Penrose, polite yet distant, Miss Eleanor Harrington, hollow-eyed and restless, Mr. Marcus Sterling, whose practiced smile today had a brittle edge, and Mrs. Olive Davies, whose steady gaze suggested more stout resolve than was appropriate for a mere housekeeper. Inspector Blackwood arrived shortly thereafter, clipboard in hand, ready to resume the inquiries. After brief formalities, Poirot stood. "Miss Amis, today we shall speak frankly. I wish to understand not only what occurred, but why each of you behaved as you did during the hours surrounding Sir Edmund's demise. Let us begin with the study itself." They repaired to the crime scene. The study door was opened with respectful ceremony. By daylight, the room revealed further details, a faint impression in the carpet where someone had knelt, the inkwell spout still caked with dried ink, and the side door's lock unlatched. Poirot pointed to the hearth. Yesterday evening, ash was disturbed not only on the floor, but also on the fender. "Who among you last tended the fire?" Mrs. Davies stepped forward. "I lit it before dinner, monsieur, then left it to burn evenly. I had no cause to return until I heard the cry." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Indeed. Yet the ash on Marcus Sterling's cuff suggests he approached the hearth more recently." He turned to the dealer. "Monsieur Sterling, how do you account for this ash?" Sterling's jaw clenched. I admired the fire's crackle, that is all. I did not handle any documents nor intend to, well, interfere with the scene." "Curious," Poirot murmured. "Especially since you declared yourself uninterested in matters of heat and flame last evening." Sterling's eyes flickered, he offered no further comment. Poirot moved to the desk. He carefully lifted the half-burnt letter and laid it atop a small tray. The words were scant but damning. "I cannot allow this to continue." "You will answer." Poirot tapped the blot of ink. "The writer threatened Sir Edmund. Who amongst you had cause to threaten him?" Lady Beatrice's poise delivered her answer. "I did not threaten him, but I confess we argued last week over the costs of restoring the chapel's frescoes." She drew a breath. "He believed the expense unjustified." "Arguments can be persuasive," Poirot observed gently, "yet you did not handle the letter." Lady Beatrice's hands remained immaculate. Dr. Penrose, fidgeting, stepped forward. As Sir Edmund's physician, I advised caution. His heart condition necessitated rest, not debate. But I would never threaten him." He shrugged. "I speak health, not malice." Poirot fixed his gaze on the doctor. He noted the man's pulse quicken, the tremor in his right hand as he withdrew his teacup. "Dr. Penrose, you professed anxiety for Sir Edmund's welfare. Yet when asked last night, you hesitated before answering." The doctor's eyes widened. I was taken aback. "Forgive me." Poirot made a calm jot in his notebook. "Forgiveness is easy. Truth is more elusive." They returned to the drawing room, and Poirot requested Miss Eleanor's gloves. The young woman obeyed, placing them gently on the table. Poirot examined the fabric under natural light. Smudges of ash lay between the delicate fingers. "Mademoiselle, you asserted that you only handled the bread basket. Yet these gloves bear other evidence." Eleanor's cheeks flamed. I went to the hearth to warm myself. I was cold, monsieur. I shoved my gloved hands into my muff, and returned without thought." Poirot's eyes softened. "Understandable in winter, but last evening's temperature scarcely justified such a measure." He leaned closer. "And yet you arrived at the study door swiftly after Monsieur Poirot departed. You must have passed through the corridor to retrieve." He paused, raising a finger. "What did you mean by hearing breathing in the dark?" Tears glistened in Eleanor's eyes. I thought someone was hurt and gasping. I hesitated at the door, then heard the cry. I ran to fetch help." Poirot inclined his head. "Compassionate, if mistaken." He laid the gloves aside. The inspector interjected, "And the boot print, Poirot?" "What of that?" Poirot smiled. "A rare maker's mark, 3 ridges in brilliant pattern. Only one of us wears such boots." He looked to Mr. Sterling. The dealer's facade cracked. "Those boots were a gift from my brother," Sterling admitted gruffly. "He imported them from Edinburgh." "Precisely," said Poirot. "You wore them last evening, as evidenced by the impression here." He waved a gloved hand at the carpet. "You left the study by the side door, not the main hall." "Why?" Sterling stared at the floor. I panicked when I saw Sir Edmund fall. I fled, I believed someone else had done this. I did not know what to do." "Fear can lead to folly," Poirot agreed. "But panic is no excuse for deceit." Inspector Blackwood took notes, frowning. Poirot rose and concluded, "We have motives in disagreement, threats in ink, footprints in ash, and collars stained with oil." Mrs. Davies's sleeve bore varnish from polishing the study's door frame. He turned to the housekeeper. Mrs. Davies's voice was steady. "I varnish and polish as required, monsieur." The study door needed a fresh coat. "Then your varnish is innocent of murder," Poirot said. "At least, until proven otherwise." He paused, eyes sweeping the assembled group. "This afternoon, I shall reconstruct the movements of each of you from 6 to 8 p.m. Until then, I advise repose. The truth will emerge, once all contrivances have been laid bare." With that, Poirot departed, leaving his companions to ponder their own secrets and suspicions. Outside, the mists began to lift, but within Brookshire Manor, the fog of uncertainty remained thick, and Poirot's little grey cells were more vigilant than ever. Chapter 5: Poirot's little grey cells at work. Late that afternoon, the storm clouds had broken, leaving the gardens of Brookshire Manor glistening from the wash of rain. Inside, the guests reclined in the drawing-room, fatigued by the morning's questioning and the heavy atmosphere of suspicion. Hercule Poirot sat upright in a high-backed armchair, his legs crossed precisely at the ankles. He clasped his hands before him, eyes half-closed, giving every impression of repose, even as his mind raced through the day's revelations. Inspector Blackwood lingered by the fireplace, reviewing his notes with determination. Lady Beatrice Harrington offered thin smiles to her niece, who stared vacantly at a spot on the carpet. Dr. Penrose stood by a window, gazing at the drenched lawns, while Mrs. Davies hovered near the side table, pretending to straighten a silver tray. Marcus Sterling alone remained alert, shifting in his chair as if each movement were scripted. Poirot's voice broke the silence. "Miss Amis, you have all been most patient. Now, allow me to share certain observations that may clarify the sequence of events." He produced from his jacket an ivory calling card stamped with a small lavender sprig. This fragment, he held it aloft, fell from the pocket of one of our company. He paused until all eyes turned toward him. "Miss Eleanor, to whom do we owe the fragrance of lavender?" Eleanor's cheeks colored. I wear lavender sachets in my gloves. They are Aunt Beatrice's gift." She glanced at her aunt, who returned the look with cool reserve. Poirot sank back, steepling his fingers. "Just so. Yet I detected, upon the gloves recovered from the hearth, traces of both ash and this very scent. A combination most peculiar, suggesting that someone approached the fire not merely to burn a letter, but to conceal their identity." Mrs. Davies paled. "I assure you, monsieur, I cleaned that hearth just before dinner. Any ash would have been removed." "Indeed," said Poirot, "which leads me to believe the gloves were placed there deliberately, to mislead." He tapped a slender finger on his knee. But misdirection is a dance I know well. He rose and crossed to the window, gazing at the roses heavy with raindrops. Next, consider the clock in the dining room. Lady Beatrice, you claimed it needed no adjustment, yet you were the one to tamper with it last night. Why else but to delay discovery of the crime? The hostess's composure faltered, a faint crease appearing between her brows. Lady Beatrice inclined her head. I observed that its mechanism had slowed. I sought only to prevent it from chiming incorrectly during dinner. An admirable impulse, Poirot conceded, yet the clock's window is stiff. It would not suddenly cease unless manipulated by someone unfamiliar with its idiosyncrasies. He smiled gently. That narrows the field of suspects for me. Flower petals drifted from a vase as he turned to Dr. Penrose. Doctor, you advised Sir Edmund to interpret his ailments conservatively. Yet I discovered a packet of belladonna pills in his medicine chest, unprescribed and recent. Can you explain their presence? The physician stiffened. I found those pills among his personal effects. I did not concern myself with their origin. Poirot's eyes glittered. A convenient oversight. Belladonna in small doses induces drowsiness, helpful, perhaps, if one planned a murderous liaison in the study. The doctor's jaw clenched, but he offered no rebuttal. Poirot moved to the coffee table, where the reconstructed pieces of the half-burnt letter rested on white blotting paper. With deft fingers, he fitted the fragments together, restoring the torn message. I cannot allow this to continue. You will answer for your deception at Brookshire. He read the words aloud. Deception. Who among you stood to lose the most by Sir Edmund's uncovering of a falsehood? He surveyed their faces, Lady Beatrice's mask of calm, Eleanor's downcast eyes, Penrose's taut expression, Mrs. Davies's vigilant posture, and Sterling's uneasy shuffling. In addition, Poirot continued, I have examined the forgery of the Cézanne sketch. Under ultraviolet light, I detected the dealer's signature disguised beneath the paint, Mr. Sterling, correct? Sterling attempted a protest, but Poirot silenced him with a raising of the hand. Yes, you sought to present the copy as the genuine article, then sell it on the continent. Sir Edmund discovered your scheme and confronted you. Silence hung in the air. Sterling's cheeks were flushed. He began, but Poirot turned to another point. Yet the killing blow was delivered not in anger, but in fear. The angle of the letter opener suggests a right-hander, positioned so as to inflict minimal noise. The lack of struggle implies Sir Edmund was too surprised to react. He paused, letting the inference settle. Eleanor inhaled sharply. You think I could not have heard their voices? On the contrary, said Poirot. You heard the quarrel, slipped out to warn your aunt, then returned quietly, hoping to protect someone you loved. Eleanor's shoulders drooped as she wept softly. Poirot turned to Lady Beatrice. Madam, your disagreement over chapel funds was indeed heated, but it would not provoke murder. No, the motive runs deeper. You discovered the forged sketch and attempted to burn Mr. Sterling's incriminating letter, leaving ash upon your niece's gloves. Perhaps you believed that, by sacrificing the artist's letter, you could save your family's honor. Lady Beatrice's composure cracked. Yes. I only wished to prevent scandal. But I swear, I did not kill my husband. Scandal aversion is understandable, Poirot acknowledged, but murder is another matter entirely. He returned to the letter, small grey cells whirring. Consider also the faint scent of lavender in the study, your perfume, madam. Yet you entered in haste, forgetting gloves, leaving prints on Sir Edmund's spectacles. He produced a small evidence bag containing the glasses. You cleaned them just before your first call on me. Her eyes widened. I did not realize. Poirot tucked the spectacles into his pocket. That, too, is a clue. Finally, he said, selecting a piece of debris from the carpet, a shard of varnish tinted with oil, and examining it in his palm. This varnish matches that used on the study's desk frame. Mrs. Davies. The housekeeper held up her hands. I varnish all woodwork at Lady Beatrice's direction. Precisely, Poirot said. But last night, someone had to smuggle the original sketch from the gallery into the study, requiring a protective sleeve made from packing paper. That paper carried varnish residue from the desk, implicating you only by proximity, not volition. He set the shard down. Thus, we have Mr. Sterling's plan to profit by fraud, thwarted by Sir Edmund's discovery, Lady Beatrice's desperate attempt to destroy evidence, Miss Eleanor's futile cover-up, Dr. Penrose's suspicious medicines, and Mrs. Davies's unwitting involvement. Poirot raised his hands gracefully. Tomorrow, we shall gather once more to finalize the sequence. For now, let the little grey cells rest, assured that the path to truth is nearly clear. As he spoke, the last rays of sunlight filtered through the windows, illuminating the faces of Brookshire Manor's inhabitants, each of whom now knew that the detective was closing in on the final reveal. Chapter 6, A Shocking Twist. The morning sun filtered weakly through rain-spattered windows as Poirot descended the grand staircase toward the gallery. His mind churned with the clues collected so far, ash and lavender, footprints and varnish, but nothing prepared him for the scene that met his arrival. The glass case that had held the prized Cézanne sketch stood empty, the plinth beneath it pristine except for a single, crisp slip of pale paper. Inspecting the frame, Poirot noted that the hinges remained undisturbed and the lock unforced. He circled the display, his gaze sharp as ever. On the easel beside the case, mounted for easier viewing, was an impeccably executed duplicate of the original, a forgery so skillful that only under ultraviolet light did its telltale pigments glow. He pressed a glove to his moustache and murmured, "Mon Dieu, this changes everything." Lady Beatrice, summoned by a discreet servant, stood at the doorway. Her face was composed, but her eyes betrayed alarm. "Monsieur Poirot, has something happened?" He beckoned her forward. "Observe, madam. The genuine sketch has vanished, replaced by this copy." The thief worked with confidence and haste. He lifted the forged piece by its corner and allowed it to turn, catching the light. Yet a haste that left us this clue. Lady Beatrice's gaze flicked to the floor. Poirot followed her glance to a small, dark smudge on the parquet, oil, perhaps from the lacquer on a frame. "You see," he continued, "our culprit visited the gallery after dinner, unobserved." At that moment, Miss Eleanor burst into the room, her cheeks flushed. "Monsieur, last night, I stepped outside for air and saw Mr. Sterling near the window here. He slipped away when he thought I did not notice." She caught her breath. He glanced back, as though expecting someone. Marcus Sterling was ushered in by Inspector Blackwood, whose inquisitive brow suggested impatience. Sterling's composure cracked when he faced the gallery's emptiness. I was merely checking the weather," he stammered. "The storm was building and I feared damage to the collection." Poirot smiled thinly. An admirable concern, but one would scarcely remove the artwork from its case to survey the clouds. He produced a small ultraviolet lamp and shone it upon the sketch surface. Under its glow, invisible brushstrokes revealed Sterling's signature, hidden beneath the varnish. "This forgery bears your hallmark, monsieur." Sterling paled. I merely prepared the replica in case of damage. I did not intend to remove the original." "Intent is rendered moot by action," Poirot replied crisply. The art left its rightful place, and so did someone with knowledge of Sir Edmund's inspection schedule. At that moment, Mrs. Davies entered, carrying a tray of tea. She started at the forgery. "Good heavens!" she exclaimed, setting the tray down. In her haste, she brushed against the wall, dislodging a small scrap of paper. Poirot picked it up, a receipt from M&H Art Limited, dated only days before, for framing services. He turned the paper over to reveal a faint fingerprint smudge on the inked numbers. The inspector retrieved a fingerprint kit. Moments later, the print was matched to Dr. Penrose. The doctor's face lost all color. "Belladonna, forgery, threats, and now this," Poirot said. "Dr. Penrose, you colluded in the theft." Penrose shook his head vigorously. "No." "The fingerprint, yes, I pressed that receipt when I advised Sir Edmund on the cost of reframing. I handled the paperwork in the library." Poirot raised an elegant finger. "Yet why would you, unless pressured by another?" He paused, letting the question hang. Dr. Penrose sank into a chair. "Mr. Sterling threatened to expose my involvement in the chapel fund's argument unless I aided him. He promised a share of the profit. I never thought he would kill Sir Edmund." Sterling's eyes flicked to the door, as if planning escape. Lady Beatrice gasped. "Alistair, how could you?" The physician's shoulders slumped. "I was weak. I believed it would spare my career, but it only made matters worse." Poirot refocused on the empty case. "And the original?" he asked. "Where is it now?" Inspector Blackwood swept the gallery with his torch. Behind a marble pillar, he found a rolled canvas tucked within a gilded portfolio. The original Cézanne lay safely inside. As he handed it to Poirot, the detective murmured, "Our treasure is recovered, but the betrayal cuts deeper." In the silence that followed, Poirot surveyed the assembled company. "We have uncovered the forgery, the theft, and the role of each conspirator. Yet the murder remains at the heart of our puzzle." He looked at Lady Beatrice. "Madam, you once admitted to burning a letter. Dr. Penrose's confession explains some of that, but not all. Why did you so desperately wish to destroy evidence?" Lady Beatrice's composure crumbled. She sank into a chair, her pearls skewed. "The letter named someone other than Alistair as an accomplice. I feared it would ruin my niece's reputation. Eleanor's name was on it." Eleanor cried out, "Me?" Poirot shook his head gently. "Not as you imagine. The letter was addressed to Sir Edmund from an unknown hand, threatening him for concealing the forgery of a Flemish study he acquired. It named the real forger, Monsieur Sterling. You burned it to protect your niece from scandal, believing her implicated." Lady Beatrice covered her face. "I was wrong. I see that now." Poirot leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "In our next gathering, we shall piece together the exact moments of each action. For now, remember this, appearances deceive, but the truth endures." With the sketch restored and the participants laid bare, Brookshire Manor seemed to breathe again, though the echo of betrayal would linger until Poirot's final unravelling of the crime. Chapter 7, The Calm Before the Storm. By the late afternoon light, Brookshire Manor felt suspended between accusation and confession. The guests gathered once more in the drawing-room, where the heavy drapes were drawn but for a single pane of glass through which the dying sun slanted across the carpet. A hush reigned as Hercule Poirot stood before them, cane in hand, his expression grave but composed. "Miss Amis," he began, his voice measured, "we have now traversed the murky alleys of suspicion. Tonight, I propose we retrace each step taken between 6 and 8 o'clock on the evening of the crime. Only by laying our movements side by side shall the true chronology emerge." He motioned to a paneled section of wall, where he had placed 6 small chairs in a semicircle. The inspector joined Poirot, bearing a lantern. "I shall record every detail," Blackwood said. "Let us proceed with utmost candor." Poirot tapped the first chair. Sir Edmund sat here, examining the newly arrived Impressionist canvas. "You handled the work until precisely 6:12, when you paused to consult your notes." Sir Edmund Harrington, summoned from his private quarters, confirmed the timepiece peeking from under his waistcoat. "Correct," he said. "I then made a note to speak with my physician at once." Poirot nodded and turned to Dr. Penrose. "Doctor, you arrived at the study at 6:15, bearing your medical bag. You examined Sir Edmund's pulse and advised rest. How long did that consultation last?" The doctor hesitated before answering. "Roughly 5 minutes. I left at 6:20. "Very good." Poirot indicated a second chair. "You will occupy this seat." Dr. Penrose complied. Poirot held his cane against the polished floor. "You recall Dr. Penrose found Sir Edmund unwell, yet at 6:25 you returned to the library to retrieve a prescription you thought misplaced." The doctor's face paled. "I did so, monsieur, to ensure I had the correct dosage." Poirot made a discreet note. Next, Miss Eleanor stepped forward. "You left the dining room at 6:30 to check on your aunt," Poirot said, placing her in the third chair. "By your own admission, you paused outside the study doorway, hearing voices, one raised in anger, another soft in plea." Eleanor swallowed. "I heard a harsh word, then nothing but the storm's patter." Poirot's eyes never wavered. "And the gloves you wore bore both ash and lavender, evidence of your journey to the hearth and back. Not merely a search for warmth, but perhaps an attempt to conceal your scent." Eleanor bowed her head. "I meant only to bring comfort to Aunt Beatrice." "Comfort can be misread," Poirot replied. He moved to the fourth chair. "Lady Beatrice, you stated you returned from the drawing room at 6:35 to wind the clock. Yet the clock's mechanism resists tampering. You left the device in perfect order, but the second hand lagged. Why?" She pressed her gloved fingers together. "I feared the chimes would disrupt our evening. I had no other reason." Poirot tapped his foot. A noble sentiment, yet the delay bought time for another to slip away unnoticed. He gestured to Mr. Marcus Sterling. "You arrived here at 6:45, claiming to admire the rainfall through the gallery window." Sterling shifted in his chair. "I did. The storm was intense." Poirot steered him to the fifth chair. "But the gallery's glass is thick and sealed, no draughts penetrate. Why leave your fellow guests, if not to access the Cézanne?" Sterling opened his mouth and closed it. I wished only to ensure the painting was secure." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "And yet you did so unobserved, leaving only oil smudges on the floor, residue from your handling of the frame." Finally, Mrs. Olive Davies took the sixth seat. Poirot lowered himself onto the arm of a nearby couch. "Madam, you polished the study's door late yesterday. Your varnish bears a unique undertone, detected on the slip of paper recovered behind the gallery door. Tell us how that paper came to bear your mark." The housekeeper met his eyes steadily. I placed old ledger sheets behind the frame to support the sketch during transport to the gallery." She hesitated. "I did not intend mischief." Poirot inclined his head. "Practical, yet ill-advised." He stood and swept the room with a decisive gesture. "We have 6 testimonies, each a thread in our tapestry. Now picture the scene. Sir Edmund bent over his desk at 7 o'clock, Dr. Penrose departing 2 minutes later, Miss Eleanor on the hearth at 7:05, Lady Beatrice adjusting the clock at 7:10, Mr. Sterling entering the gallery corridor at 7:15, Mrs. Davies repositioning the ledger at 7:20. By 7:25, the murderer must have slipped into the study, undetected, unchallenged. Inspector Blackwood consulted his notebook. That leaves a 5-minute window for the fatal act. Poirot tapped his moustache. Precisely. The letter opener delivered the blow, angled so the tip struck just beneath the collarbone. The victim's sumptuous neckcloth muffled any sound. Then, the killer paused only to ensure the letter lay defenseless, before retreating through the side exit. Silence settled as each listener absorbed the reconstruction. Poirot's eyes glinted. Tomorrow, I shall reveal which of you possessed both the opportunity and the motive to commit murder, who acted under the cloak of a storm, confident that their scheme would withstand scrutiny. Prepare yourselves. The lantern's glow flickered on the portraits lining the walls, their painted faces inscrutable. Outside, a distant peal of thunder echoed as if in anticipation. Within, Brookshire Manor held its breath, poised on the brink of truth. Chapter 8, The Little Grey Cells Triumphant. The drawing room was hushed, every leather-bound volume on the shelves seeming to hold its breath as Hercule Poirot rose from his seat. A single lamp cast a warm pool of light around him, accentuating the precise lines of his suit and the gleam in his keen eyes. Inspector Blackwood stood at his side, ready to take charge once the truth lay bare. The remaining guests, Lady Beatrice Harrington, Miss Eleanor, Dr. Penrose, Mrs. Davies, and Mr. Sterling, formed a tight semicircle before him, each bearing the weight of unspoken secrets. Miss Amos, Poirot began, we have assembled all the fragments of our puzzle, the torn letter, the misplaced clock, the boot prints in ash, the scent of lavender, the varnished tint, the hidden forgery, and the tablet of belladonna. Each of these details pointed to a distinct actor in our drama, but only one hand delivered the fatal blow. He paused to let the gravity of his words sink in. He held aloft the reconstructed letter. This note was penned in anger by you, Mr. Sterling, after Sir Edmund discovered your counterfeit sketch. You threatened him here, in this very house, and in your panic you slipped the draft into your pocket. Lady Beatrice found it, fearing a scandal that would stain her niece. Hence the charred edge and the ash upon Eleanor's gloves, the perfect diversion. He placed the paper on the small table with care. Poirot turned to Dr. Penrose. Your medicinal expertise was enlisted to dull Sir Edmund's awareness, belladonna to cloud his mind, and you delivered that concoction under the guise of routine care. Yet you never harmed him directly, you believed your involvement would remain buried. The doctor bowed his head. Eleanor's face blanched. But Monsieur Poirot, You acted out of love, Poirot interjected gently. You feared for your aunt's reputation, not your uncle's welfare. Your errand to the study was a bid to protect Lady Beatrice, not to see Sir Edmund suffer. He smiled kindly at the young woman. All these machinations, Poirot continued, fixing his gaze on the accused, culminated when you realized Sir Edmund had called you into the library at precisely 7 o'clock. He confronted you with evidence of your deceit. In that moment of desperation you seized the letter opener, an instrument at hand, and plunged it into his shoulder. The angle and single, firm thrust proved you accustomed to swift, silent action. Sterling's voice trembled. Monsieur, it was supposed to be only a threat. Threats may be spoken in haste, Poirot replied, but murder is deliberate. You believed that by silencing Sir Edmund you would secure both the painting and your escape. He steered the company's attention to the recovered Cézanne. You replaced the genuine sketch with your copy here in the gallery, all on your fingertips. The smudge led us to your corridor, where the varnish drop and varnish-stained ledger revealed your passage. At each stage, your trail was masked by these distractions: the clock wound to stall discovery, the lavender-scented gloves to mislead, the ash disturbed to confuse. Lady Beatrice inhaled sharply. "I helped burn the letter, but I never dreamed." "Your intentions were honorable," Poirot assured her, "yet misguided. You sought to shield family honor, not understanding the consequences of destroying evidence." Inspector Blackwood moved forward to place Sterling under arrest. The condemned man offered no resistance, his head sunk in remorse. Mrs. Davies closed her eyes, tears gleaming. Dr. Penrose placed a comforting hand on his niece's arm, while Lady Beatrice covered her face with a trembling handkerchief. Poirot addressed the silent room one final time. "In every deliberate act there is a motive, and in every clue a path to revelation. It is the mind that orders chaos into clarity, Miss Amis. Let us never forget that truth, like art, must be appreciated in its entirety." As the inspector led Mr. Sterling away, Poirot gathered Lady Beatrice and Eleanor in the glow of the lamp. Mademoiselle, you have endured much this weekend. May this resolution bring you peace." He adjusted his cravat with his customary flourish. "And now, I shall take my leave of Brookshire Manor, comforted that order, at last, has been restored." Under the gentle sweep of his departing steps, the manor's long corridors seemed to exhale. Outside, the evening star began its vigil over the Cotswold hills, untroubled by human folly, yet forever witness to the triumph of little grey cells.